Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. I still clearly remember that day, a fall afternoon in the suburbs of Minnesota. The dry leaves scattered across the path leading to Mark's house, each step seeming to disturb the stillness of the air. The chill in the air carried the smell of earth and rotting wood, drifting on the wind. I pulled my coat tighter around me, feeling the wind slip through the collar, bringing a vague but uncomfortable sensation. Mark's house appeared before me, an old two-story wooden house, deeply reminiscent of 1970s America. The swing on the porch creaked in the wind, the peeling paint revealing the dark wood underneath. Every detail evoked a nostalgic yet slightly eerie feeling. Mark and I had many memories tied to this house. When we were kids, we would play in the garden or in the basement. I want you to help clean the basement. I think we might find some interesting stuff from when we were kids, Mark said. Those words sparked my curiosity because the basement had been the place we used to hide for hours, telling ghost stories and daring each other to walk through the darkness. But it had been a long time since any of us dared to mention it. We stood before the door leading to the basement. Mark's hand gripped the flashlight tightly, his eyes constantly scanning, as if he feared someone was watching. "That's the devil's domain," Mark said with a light laugh. But seeing the worried look on Mark's face, I knew the basement wasn't just a messy place. The wooden stairs creaked with every step. The flashlight's beam swept across the walls covered in cobwebs, revealing stains and patches of mildew. A musty smell filled the air, mixed with a foul stench, as if something was decaying. I held tightly to the railing, trying not to look down. The weak light from Mark's flashlight swept across a corner of the room, where a large wooden box was hidden in the shadows. The old box, its paint chipped away, looked as if it had been there for decades. Mark bent down, his hands trembling as he opened the box. A putrid, rotting smell wafted up, causing me to step back, my hand covering my mouth. In the dim light, I saw what was inside: animal carcasses, cats, mice, birds, stuffed into the box. Some were intact, but most had decayed, their fur matted together, and a dark brown, slimy liquid spilling from the sides of the box. My heart pounded, and a wave of nausea rose within me. Mark stood frozen, the flashlight in his hand flickering as if he too couldn't control it. "Isaiah," he whispered hoarsely, almost as if in disbelief. Isaiah, the 17-year-old boy, with a cold face and empty eyes. He always kept his distance from everyone, lost in his own world. Mark told me that Isaiah liked to collect things that others threw away, old toys, bottle caps, and sometimes even stranger things. But this wasn't a hobby. This was something else. Mark confessed to me that he had once seen Isaiah kill a bird in his yard a few months ago. "I thought it was just a stupid prank," Mark said, his voice breaking. "But now, I'm not so sure." Mark's parents decided to send Isaiah for psychological treatment after finding strange drawings in his room, images of torn-up animals, twisted faces full of rage. I remember Isaiah's cold, challenging stare when he was taken away, as though he could see right through us. A month later, Mark called me. Isaiah had escaped from the treatment center. The police were notified, but every search attempt had been in vain. Soon after, strange things began happening in the area. Animals went missing, and their bodies were found in a state of brutal torture. The news spread throughout the town, but no one dared to speak Isaiah's name. One late evening, while driving past Mark's house, I saw a figure standing by the second-floor window. My heart stopped. It couldn't be Mark, and clearly, it was no one else but Isaiah. That night, I dreamed of Isaiah. He was standing at the foot of my bed, his deep eyes and cold smile on his lips. "Are you scared?" His voice echoed in my head. I shot up, my back drenched in sweat. Since then, I've never stopped feeling like I'm being watched. One evening, as I was heading home, I saw muddy footprints right in front of my living room window. I didn't dare to investigate further. Isaiah was still missing, and no one knew where he was. But I knew one day I'd see his name on the news, tied to a horrific crime.
My name's Owen. I'm 32 years old. I'm married for a year now. Me and my wife, we're residing in Long Island. We are living in a rather old house. According to our knowledge, we're the fourth owner of the estate. Existed for 30 years now. As all newlyweds, we're not rich, so both of us decided to pick up this estate, being the most affordable for us. The house is rather sturdy, even after many decades. The only catch was its rather old-fashioned design. Whoever built this lodging and owned it first must be someone rather wealthy. However, after 6 months residing here, there were strange things that occurred to us that defied all logical explanation. One evening, my wife and I were having our time watching movies in the living room. It was a rom-com, which was ruined at the climatic moment as I noticed something in the corner of my eyes, enough to startle me to a yelp. "What's going on?" My wife, also startled, asked me back. "There's a pale woman behind the TV, hon." She just laughed it off, saying that I'm seeing things, despite the fact that I have tried to describe that woman for her. Pale white figure, sunken eyes, but she wasn't buying it, telling me that I was hallucinating things that weren't there. Another time, I had to relieve myself in the middle of the night. When I was in front of the sink and watching myself in the mirror, she came to me again. She was right there behind my back, and this time I was able to see her more clearly. Emaciated, pale, with sunken eyes. The sight was more than enough to send me running to a panic attack. The third time I saw her was when I was cleaning the floor. She was walking rather heavily, slowly toward the basement behind the main house. She was wearing a long dress, the type of which went out of fashion many years ago, singing along the way, with her haunting voice echoing along the hallways. She looked pregnant with swollen abdomen. This time my wife did consider what I told her, but she instead thought of me having psychological issues due to overworking. Why the heck am I the only person seeing things when my wife's immune to that shit? So I decided to purchase a more modern house in downtown area with a 20-year payment plan terms. I would go nuts staying here any longer. The house now I'll redecorate and put it for rent. To fasten the paces, I chose the hourly rate cleaning service. There were too many things to clean up here, so it took more than a day to complete. With cleaning up complete, we have finally decided on what to carry forward and what to discard. However, the two cleaning staff said about a rather heavy metal chest in the basement that they would like to have me help in carrying it upstairs. I knew about this chest the day we moved in, but due to it being very heavy, we decided to leave it there for good. It took all four of us a lot of work to finally haul it out of the basement area. With things finally arranged, except for the heavy chest, we could finally rest. Tomorrow I'd deal with it. Likely it would need to be towed away. That was our final night here at the old house. However, weird things started to come up again. There's a lot of creepy sounds coming from the metal chest. First was the weeping of a woman. Then came loud bangs echoing from within the chest. Last but not least, the wailing of a child wheezing from within the accursed object. I could barely sleep while my wife's sleeping soundly that night. The next morning, having enough of it, I decided to open it up. My wife nagged at me for being unreasonable, but I couldn't stand it any longer. I felt an urge to open it up, to come to terms with all of my suffering. So I pried it open with all my strength. A nasty smell from within assaulted my sense of smell, gagged me up, forced me to vomit under such nauseating stench. My wife threw me a look of concern. For her, I was being unreasonable, and now was reaping the consequences. After calming myself down, I decided to look inside the chest, and immediately regret that decision. The first thing I saw was human feet, then arms, and finally, a human face. All was submerged within a fluid of something like paint. Now thinking back, I wished I did have a mental issue like my wife said. At least I could forget what I'd seen there. So I called the police, fighting the nausea the entire time. The police said it was the body of a woman. She was heavily pregnant at the 9th month by the time she was dead. Needless to say, we were in a state of shock and panic at the news. She was found shrunken to a fetal position, still clutching within the out-of-fashion long dress. The same one that I had seen her in the mirror with. After thorough examinations, they found the chest originated from an industrial factory only 12 miles away. However, the chest model was out of commission a decade ago already. Me and my wife, we also provided the information of the previous owner to the police. They quickly found the third and second owner after backtracking, tracing it up to the very first owner. The two previous owners claimed that the chest had always been there when they moved in. That thing, however, was so heavy that they all decided to just leave it there, and then it was forgotten. So the police searched for the first owner. His name's Thomas, the builder of this house, and also the owner of that previously mentioned factory. However, he'd passed away 3 years ago due to a heart attack. Thomas had a wife and a son who's almost 30 years old now. After mentioning about the body in the chest, they claimed no knowledge about that. Thomas divorced his wife when his son was only 4 years of age. She's been living away for all this time, only receiving alimony arrangement from her previous husband. Because it was related to Thomas, the body within was likely his mistress. So the police suggested a DNA test of the unborn child and Thomas's son. The match was solid at 25%. They were indeed half-siblings. The case, however, was only 50% completed. There's still a lot of questions going unanswered, like who's the killer and what's the motive for the killing. But the most haunting for me was when I was looking at Thomas's picture. He and I were uncannily familiar.
My name's Richard, 35 years old. I'm working for a construction company, major in structural engineering. 2 years ago, I was assigned to researching on a dismantle of a building. It's a building in the outskirt of the city, in the eviction area. The building was large and very sturdy, constructed some 15 years earlier. In order to dismantle it safely, I'd need to study the site in order to calculate the amount of explosive used and in which area so the collapse would be at the least risks. My supervisor had greenlit on the permission to stay in the building and facilitate the structural study. The day I moved in, 2 tenants welcomed me in, a mother and son. The mother name's Kate, 66 years old, and her son Jim, 41 years old. They lived here for a long time and seemed to understand the building very well, even providing me with very detailed structural maps. Jim was pretty gentle and polite, while Kate, in stark contrast, was rather rude and seemed to ignore me at every turn. My accommodation was a room on the 3rd floor. I scoured the entire building, and I'd admit this house architecture was really strange. Advancing to the 2nd floor, the walls were sunken down with a strange cave-in, about 6 feet high, 3 feet wide, and about 1 foot sunken in. Within the sunken part hung a bundle of roses. I came closer to take a better look, man. The wall there was like at least 3 feet. I asked Jim about this disparity and why no one bothered fixing it. He just smiled softly. That's where my dad passed away when the building came down to the final phase. An accident, and he's buried in the cement. I was really shocked at his revelation, while Jim wasn't so thrilled about it. Moving up to the 3rd floor, I asked Jim further about the architecture and the building blueprints. As far as I was told, the architecturer who designed this building is Christopher, a rather famous one in the field. Jim told me that 15 years ago, Christopher had vanished without a trace. All police attempts came up empty-handed, and all of them agreed that Christopher left behind a rather mysterious building that even them couldn't crack it. Jim told me about Christopher's old room in the highest floor and told me that this room was off limit. I agreed and returned to my room, starting with the instruments and study of the basic layout. However, in the evening when I was taking a shower, I could hear sounds coming from behind the glass. However, upon checking everything, I couldn't find anything unusual at all. At night when I sleep, that sound once again rang out. It felt kinda like someone's calling me or calling for help. Later the following morning, I went downstairs and met Kate in the kitchen. I asked her whether there was anyone else residing in the building and was told that the three of us was the only residents here. After breakfast, I began my observation to mark up the foundations for demolition. When I made my way to the highest floor, I remembered Jim's order, but I was curious, so I ventured further into Christopher's old room. There was a lot of architecture books there, and quite a few personal stuffs that weren't coated in dust at all, as if it had been regularly used. I was rummaging through the stuffs until a voice boomed from behind me. "You just forgot what I've told you already." Jim stood in the doorway, looking at me, smiling. Yet I felt so uneasy by that smile. I told him that I just wanted to look for additional information of the building that'd help in my survey. After leaving the room, I felt very strange about Jim. When I was strolling on the second floor hallway, I saw Kate standing facing the wall that her husband died on. She brought over a fresh bundle of roses, hands over the deflated area. She must have missed her husband dearly. After realizing my gaze upon her, she threw back her cold gaze upon me. She demanded I stop all demolition attempts, because she'd rather die in the house rather than seeing it demolished. I could have no way to console her about it. After all, it's what I had to do. That night I went to bed rather late, yet suddenly I heard someone wailing and begging. Walked out of the room, I was surprised to know that it was Kate. She was kneeling and crying on the deflated wall commemorating her husband's demise. She begged him not to come back for her anymore. The pain in her voice made me shudder. I thought there's some crazy secrets that was hidden in this very household. At night, I woke up due to a sudden sense of cold, enough to make me shiver. When I was able to open my eyes, I realized that I was locked up in a very tight space, with slippery walls surrounded. I was in full panic, slammed hard on the walls and screamed aloud, hoping for someone's attention. Suddenly the ceiling opened up, came over with blinding white light shining down upon me. A shadow appeared, quietly looked down upon me, despite my ceaseless pleading for help. That shadow didn't say anything, but just pouring down a thick substance. Only when it came and touched me that I realized it was all cement. The caustic wet cement seemed to have eating through clothes and body. The pain was unbearable, and I could only scream and hope it would go away. Until the moment the cement rose overhead and the substances streamed through all my orifices. It was until that I jolted completely awake, the caustic taste still linger in my mouth. It was all just a bad nightmare, and thanks to that, I was unable to go back to sleep. Later that morning, I sneaked back to Christopher's room to search for additional information relating to this household. Before I was able to come in, I realized the room was occupied. It was Jim. He's rather, verse around this part of the house. Jim went to the corner of the room and pushed on some hidden furniture there, revealing a large hole within. I carefully marked the location in my memory to avoid Jim's detection. A few days later, I tried to act as normal as I could in front of the two tenants. Every location for demolition charges and building foundations had been made and mailed back to the company's headquarters for processing. Kate was becoming more and more cold and rude, while Jim was acting rather relaxed. On my last day there, I snuck up on the secret chamber in Christopher's workroom when everyone had fallen asleep. It was a rather small, dampened place with 2 observation holes carved out into my bedroom and bathroom. So, Jim had always kept me under his watch from the start. When I was deep in my thought, I saw Jim sneaking to my bedroom a sharp knife on his hand. He slowly made his way to my bed, swinging it high. He swiftly lifted up my sheet for a strike, but then stopped when couldn't see me there. Those actions were in stark contrast with the gentle smile that man often wore on his face. It was when I realized that Jimmy Guy was no joke. He's truly a serial killer, hidden in plain sight. Jim angrily stormed to the bathroom. After a deep breath, he quickly ran out of the room. I knew where he's heading and placed myself accordingly. Right across Christopher's room, I could hear raging footsteps getting closer and closer. So I did the only logical thing I could, closed the door shut and locked it from behind. The door suddenly bulged up by strong impacts. Okay, that guy was really into me now. I thought, braced myself in the short corner behind the door. Open up! This is the police. Hearing that, I knew that I would be safe and opened up the door to the authority. So as a precaution, I called the police before venturing here to this door. Now safe, I could see the police arresting Mrs. Kate and Jim. Initial diagnosis concluded that he's suffering a serious case of schizophrenia. When the building was manually dismantled, workers there discovered a small hidden section right behind my room. In there was a dying old man. That was Christopher. After recovery, he told that he was the grandfather of Jim. That twisted man had buried his own father alive in concrete, and I legally imprisoned his grandfather for 15 years. I didn't dare to imagine what would become of me if I hadn't alerted the police before going to the room.
I'm Adam, 29 years old. My family is not wealthy. I was born in the rural town of Chateau in Montana. Although I was born and lived in Chateau for 13 years, I didn't feel connected to this place. I always dreamed of living in a larger city, a place with many amusement parks and bustling shopping centers. My wish came true when I was 13 years old. After many years of hard work, my parents could finally afford a small house in the city of Billings. On the day we moved from Chateau, I was very happy and excited, to the point I couldn't sleep the night before. In the morning when we left our old house, I didn't look back even once. I didn't know that I was trying to escape from a peaceful and happy life and heading towards long, lonely days. The new family home is located at the end of a crowded street. It has deteriorated quite a bit, but that's all my parents could afford at that time. My room is on the attic floor, a small room with creaky wooden floors which produce an annoying sound every step. In addition to some old belongings, there were books and toys left behind. I guessed its previous owner, who seemed to be around my age. My room has a window overlooking a corner of the backyard, which made the house seem even smaller due to its spacious surroundings. I eagerly arranged some small toys received as birthday gifts on an already worn-out wooden table. The older items from my room had been boxed up and stored under this very same table. I was so excited, imagining this new life could bring forth. On the first night in the new house, everything felt quite unfamiliar. I couldn't sleep very well. Lying in bed, I tried to close my eyes, when suddenly there was a knock on the wall opposite me. I jolted upright, suspicious of this sound I had just heard. Approaching the wall, and pressed my ear against it to listen. I swear I could hear someone's steady breath coming from the wall. I raised my hand to knock on the wall, and immediately there was a knock in response. Terrified, I screamed loudly, and a few seconds later, my parents came up. My mother hugged me, trying to reassure me, while my father walked around to check the room. After confirming that nothing was unusual, my parents comforted me, saying that the house was old and that strange noises were completely normal. As he spoke, my father walked around and bounced, causing the floorboards to creak continuously. Even when he stopped, the floor let out a few more creaks before going quiet. My parents wished me good night and left. I told my mother I wanted to leave the lights on while I slept to feel more comfortable. In the following days, precisely at midnight, there would be a knock coming from the wall opposite my bed.
But other than it was just that one knock at that exact time, everything else remained normal. Gradually, I paid less attention to the knocking, and it eventually disappeared without me noticing. My parents were very busy with their new jobs, and I spent more and more time home alone. On those days, my mother would prepare meals for me in advance, and my father often called to make sure I was okay. They also asked our neighbor Cassie to keep an eye on me too. I would turn on all the lights in the house overnight, so everything was crystal clear in such bright light, which made me feel more at ease. Life in this crowded modern city made me feel lonely. It was not what I had imagined. I missed my old friends back in Chateau. In the new school, I found it was too hard to integrate to new environments and make new friends. One evening while my parents were away, I groggily woke up, hearing someone calling my name. I looked at the clock. It was midnight, and I briefly thought my parents had come home. The voice called out again, whispering mysteriously, "Adam." I startled and realized that the voice was coming from the wall. I immediately jumped up, ran to the door, and tried with all my might to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I muttered angrily, cursing the damn door. "Don't be scared. Don't scream. I mean you no harm." The voice was very gentle, seemingly from a woman. Sitting down on the floor, breathing heavily, I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or if this was real. "Who's there?" I was very scared, but tried to sound tough. After a while of talking with that mysterious figure, I relaxed a bit and returned to my bed. The mysterious figure understood my feelings of loneliness. I fell asleep without realizing it. When I woke up in the morning, I wasn't sure if what had happened the night before was a dream or real, so I didn't tell my parents. They returned home after a 3-day work trip and then left again. Every time my parents were away, that mysterious figure would appear to talk to me. She introduced herself as Laura. Laura and I became friends, and she told me to keep it a secret. Otherwise, she would leave. I was so afraid of loneliness that I agreed. Whenever I had difficulties at school, I would confide in with her. My parents faced many challenges at work, and they often argued with each other. I would isolate myself in my room and block my ears to not hear any of those harsh language. Each time, Laura would appear and comfort me. She helped me learn how to overcome negative emotions, and I felt better every time I talked to Laura. I began to distance myself from my parents. Regardless of whether it was happy or sad, I just wanted to share everything with Laura. I got used to the voice and presence of that mysterious girl. My parents' caring words began to irritate me. I felt I was being controlled for no reason. I only believed what Laura said. I felt that having her was more than enough for my life. My parents noticed the changes in me and took me to see a psychiatrist. I found it ridiculous because I was completely healthy and my physical condition was good. I answered the doctor's questions vaguely, and I made the mistake of mentioning Laura. The doctor tried to get more information about her, but I completely fell silent after realizing my blunder. When we got home, my parents wouldn't stop talking about Laura and making their ridiculous assumptions. I ran upstairs, locked myself in my room, and sat in front of the wall, waiting for the time Laura would appear. I would apologize and hope she would forgive me for not keeping my promise. At exactly midnight, I called my mysterious friend's name as usual, but there was no response. I became anxious and frantic, yelling loudly for forgiveness and repeatedly banging my hands against the wall. I felt like I was going insane, digging and smashing at the wall in an effort to find Laura inside it. Outside my room, my father was trying to unlock the door while my mother was crying and begging me to calm down. About 15 minutes later, the police burst into my room, and seeing me in that state left them stunned. My mother screamed loudly and then passed out. The wall appeared to be smeared with a dark red, stenchy liquid. I sat on the floor with most of my nails completely ripped off. I was taken to the hospital and admitted to a psychiatric ward, diagnosed with severe depression. I spent 5 years there trying to escape the thoughts of that mysterious girl. Now my life is better. I have a girlfriend named Laura, a real person who is ready to love and accept my flaws.